So today's cardinal lesson, we're talking about Social Security timing, and we're going to work on giving you Tom's and my assessment of where we'd like you or how we'd like you to look at this. Okay. And so up here at the top is the timeline of a decision. And a producer for the show, we talked to him this morning, and he's not on Social Security yet. He's 66. Yeah, 66 in a few months. And what I explained to him is that he's already, he's like right here. And ever since 62, he's made a decision every month since 62 not to take Social Security, because he could have started it like 50, 55 different times in different dates to this point. And he's made it again this month. So he hasn't started his Social Security yet. And all of you listening, I'm assuming you're somewhere short of taking your Social Security. And so this is a problem that's before you, is when are you going to start it? And then it becomes more complicated if you're married. When is your spouse going to start it? And whose record is higher and whose record is lower? And who might do the spouse benefit or not? And what are the implications for a widow or widower that was collecting the smaller benefit? There's all kinds of issues floating around. And we also, so we got a decision starting at 62, going all the way to full retirement age. And then full retirement age is somewhere between 65 and 67. For most of you watching this that haven't taken it yet, your full retirement age is probably like 66, 66 and 4 months, 66 and 8 months like mine is, or 67, but it's somewhere in this zone. And that's the point where you'll get 100% of your benefit that's on your Social Security statement that they send you. And that benefit is in the future. So it'll probably be more than that benefit because they're going to apply inflation to it. But in any case, that's the age, wherever you fall according to your birth year, where you'll get your full retirement benefit, but you still have the option of delaying it further all the way to 70. And this is what I'm doing. And I am fortunate to be able to do that, in that I'm still working and I'm going to still be earning an income. God willing, I'm going to still be here several years from now, or a few years from now when I'm 70. And then when you get to that point, then your check is the largest that it could possibly be. And if you're somewhere between 132% and 124% of this full retirement benefit. So there's for me, the numbers are like $3,500 a month if I take it here, and like $4,100 a month if I take it here. And of course, those numbers will be inflated. So as a general rule, we like people to delay this as long as they possibly can. But that's just a general rule. There's a danger in getting your advice off of YouTube from somebody like me, because I'm giving advice for everybody as a general rule. You really need to tailor your advice to, and what you do and your decision to your specific situation. Okay. And what I'm going to tell you is where people generally are when they're coming into us. Most people coming into us are in their early 60s, mid 60s, some late 60s, some late 50s, kind of that general zone, and they haven't made this decision yet. Okay. Some of them have, but most of them haven't. And so we ask them when people are on their way in, have you started your Social Security yet? And people are going to answer that either yes or no. But many times when they answer it no, they say no, and I am going to start it such and such a time, and I'm doing it because of this reason. And there's like, what I find is that people that have already made up their mind, they've done it to be simple. So maybe they haven't spent a lot of time on it. They're doing it a lot of times because they've talked to their brother-in-law or their guy down at work or their friend over here that's made a decision, and they're just going to do what they were doing because it sounded like it made sense. I would like, through this video, to perhaps get you to look at this in a different way. So let me share what I've got down here on the bottom of the board. Is if I look over here, is that most people make this decision first and foremost for cash flow right now. I mean, it's pretty enticing to say, I can start getting a check from the government tomorrow, and it's for this amount. You know, maybe you're 62 years old or 63 and you're retired, so you're eligible for the check. And I mean, the cash flow now thing is enticing. Sometimes it's necessary. So when you're watching this video and you just need the money and you don't have another source of money, and you are retired or you've been laid off of your job, and don't think I'm talking you out of it. If you really need the cash flow right now, take it. But I find a lot of people are taking it just because it's enticing. And then they're backing it up with some other reasons. And, you know, if you want to be there and you want to come into us for a plan, I mean, you're the boss. So if you're pretty grounded in your arguments, we're going to give you our advice, but also you're going to do what you want to do. Now, we also have a number of people, it's not around cash flow, but they're just bent on getting the most that they possibly can out of the government. And so they're just saying, I've been paying into this thing for years, haven't gotten a dime of it. Maybe they're going to quote the story of, you know, my dad paid into it for years, and then he passed away when he was 68. He'd only collected 30 checks, and nobody got anything because my mom had gone first. I mean, people have stories like that, and so they're just thinking, or they look at their Social Security taxes that they've paid, they're waiting for it, and they just say, you know, I can see out there that the number's around 80, I don't think I'm going to live past 80, so I'm going to just start getting my checks while I can now. And so people have all that kind of logic, and I'd like them to think about something else when it relates to that. I want you to think about yourself and imagine yourself 20 years from now, 25 years from now. I've spent my career, I started doing this when I was 18, selling Medicare supplements to people who are 65 and older at that point back in 1976. So I've spent my whole career sitting down with people in their 80s and 90s and serving them and talking about their money. And sometimes now in the present day, they're the parents of the people that I'm serving in their 50s and 60s. Sometimes they're clients that I've had for many years. Regardless, I've spent a lot of time with people in their 80s and their 90s. And I'm going to tell you that Social Security check is very valuable to them, regardless of the money they have. I've sat with very wealthy people that are 88, and they're facing a lot of things, and maybe they have a lot of wealth. But the one thing that they understand very well is that Social Security check, that it comes in every month, and usually they know how much it is, and they know that that's going to come in for the rest of their life. So what I'd like you to think about is you 20, 25, 30 years from now, or if it's not you, your surviving spouse who's going to live on perhaps with your check if you're the larger wage earner and minus their own check. Just imagine this and think about how valuable this check is to a person in that age group, okay? And then I'd also like you to just think about how you've managed the rest of your money. And I'd just like you to get focused on that, because frankly, we have a lot of people who don't come to see us or somebody like me. They just kind of happen into retirement. They don't do proper financial planning, and they just kind of make some decisions, winging it as they go. They're not looking through the long term. And those kind of people, they're going to be fine in their 60s and 70s. Just spend away, manage away. And where they start to run into problems is if one of them or both of them live into their 80s and 90s. And now all of a sudden it's too late to start making some adjustments. And so one thing you can do now to prepare for that is delay your Social Security as long as you possibly can to make your check that comes in for life and gets raised by inflation every year as large as it possibly can be. Okay? Another point I wanted to make before we get into some of the facts is I find many people too focused on the Social Security system at large. You know, is the government going to be there? Is Social Security going to be there? Is this going to be something that is going to be there? And am I going to collect? And so because of that, and because of my worry about that, I'm going to take my check now, because every check I get now, I may not get anything out of this later. And so, and I may fuel some of this when I've talked in some other videos where I've talked about the Social Security system. And frankly, I think it is going to be there. And I think that the changes are going to be made within the tax system to make it there. But regardless of that, I'd like you to get less focused on that and more focused on you personally. So what I'd like to do is bring Tom in, and Tom's going to go through a little bit of the numbers on these from the show notes.
Yeah, and so we have the show notes in the link below of our video. You can also find them on our website. But the first page is just a picture of the board, and we find that a lot of people like to take a look at this as they're watching the videos, because they can take notes, they can pause it, they can look at it a little more closely, because sometimes if you're watching on your phone, it's a little small. So I encourage you to use this. The first page in here is really from a report that we really got a lot of these numbers from. And so I want to kind of walk us through just real quickly kind of what we're looking at on this page. Is, like Hans was saying, is we have your different birth year. So starting at 1955, you're currently 67. Your full retirement age is 66 and 2 months. And then every year you go past that 56, 57, 58, that increases by 2 months up until the point that anyone born after 1960, their full retirement age is 67. And so what that's really done is it's moved the full retirement age up. It has, what that also means is if you take it early at 62, you have further reduced your benefit. So what was 54 and earlier, you know, it's 75% of the check. Now it'd be like 70% for those people at 60. So that's something to consider, is by taking it at 62, which is the earliest you can take it, you will have actually a smaller check than maybe someone who was born earlier. And then again, delaying it, it gets this 8% increase each year up to the point where, you know, depending on when you were born, it's some amount higher than what your full retirement benefit is. And so I think this chart gives you a kind of a good sense of how those benefits are either decreased by taking it early or increased by taking it later. The next page really here, zoom out here. For the next page, now this one is a little busy. I don't expect you to follow all of it along here, but it's really a decision tree of, if you're just trying to think through, how do I even go about deciding whether I should take Social Security or not? This can lead you through some decisions of how to get there. We're not going to go over every point. One thing I do want to point out, and this is a question we ask most people, or almost everyone, if they're coming in and haven't taken Social Security yet, is, are you still working? I mean, that's the first question on this decision tree. And where that's really important is if you are under your full retirement age. So again, that's depending on your birthday, it differs from year to year. But if you are under your full retirement age and you are still working, there's what's called an earnings test, which means if you earn above a certain amount, right now it's like $19,500, somewhere in that range, they will withhold benefits, meaning they won't even send you the benefits if you're still working above that amount and you claim Social Security. So if you're under your full retirement age and you're working and earning a decent wage, you really do not want to take Social Security. So that's just a hard stop. Don't even consider taking it. So, I mean, that is an important question. We're going to skip over a couple of these. The other one I want to point out is, do you expect to live beyond 77? So one of the factors when we're looking at Social Security is how long do you expect to live, which is the unknown. That's one thing no one can really answer. And so if we had that date, we could calculate everybody's Social Security down to the day to file it. We don't know. We have to make assumptions here. But if we have someone, like we had a client come in who had just been diagnosed with cancer recently and, is in remission now, which is wonderful. But there is some fear that it could come back. And she's really leaning towards taking it early because she might not live long enough to reclaim this. And I'll get to this in a second here, but her check was the lowest. She's married. It's smaller than her husband's. And so you're not affecting the spousal benefit at all. So it could make sense for her to file early. So when Hans was mentioning that we normally recommend delaying, that is true, but there are circumstances that making, delaying doesn't make sense. And then the other point I'll point out is this age 81 number. And this is really the difference between if you take it at full retirement age or delay it at 70. If you expect to live past 81, or if either spouse expects to live past 81, it can make sense to delay Social Security to age 70. So the longest you can delay it, maximizing that check for you. So there's a lot of factors that go into this decision. Don't take this video as, the gospel and that we're going to do everything they say on here. I mean, it's very specific to each individual person. So I just want to have you keep that in mind. The next page, I really like this one to give you some really facts behind, okay, how long am I going to live? A lot of people, they look at their parents, how long did they live, or how long has family lived? One thing that I will point out when you do that is medicine has gotten a lot better from previous generations to now. So people are living longer. So putting a real statistic to it, if we have a married couple, which is this column here, there's a 87% that one of them is going to live past 81. 87% is a very high percentage that one of the spouses is going to live past 81. And so if we just go based off that statistic, and this isn't factoring in the cash flow question, do you actually need the money? I mean, there's a lot of factors here, but if we're looking at the pure numbers, delaying to age 70 makes sense for 87% of the couples, especially on that higher check. And the reason why I keep bringing up that higher check is when the first spouse passes away, that higher check is going to remain and the lower check is going to stop. And so when we have a couple and one spouse was a higher earner than the other, maybe one of them stayed at home with the kids and one of them kept working. I mean, whatever the situation is, it's a pretty common situation. Is that higher check is really important to delay it as long as possible, because not only are they themselves going to get the higher check while they live, if they die early, then the surviving spouse is going to continue getting that check. And so we see this all the time where most people come in with some idea of when they want to take Social Security. Some people are really firm on that. It's really hard to get them off of that. But a lot of people are kind of coming to us with the question. And so when we are looking at, some people say, well, I've done the math. I need to live into my 80s. I don't think I'm going to live that long. I'm going to take it early. And what they have failed to factor in is that spousal benefit is how is that going to affect once they pass away? If they expect to die early, their wife might live on. If it's a husband, their wife might live on many years after that. And we have permanently reduced her income along the way. And a lot of people have not considered that. Once we point that out, a lot of them start changing the tune. I did have a client the other day that kind of said, well, I just want the check for myself. And, if she can do whatever she wants, which was, I didn't really know how to handle that. It's like, well, I guess I can't, if that's where you're at. Okay. It was, it doesn't seem like a very loving thing to do, but everyone's situation is a little different. Most people though, are really wanting to take care of their spouse. They want to make sure they're okay if they pass away early. And so delaying that check really serves as a nice base income for them on into the as long as they live. When we have single people, this math gets a little bit less clear. Men statistically die earlier than women, and so there's a 57% you're going to live past 81. So there's somewhere in there can be an argument to take it sooner rather than later. But again, it is an important decision to make, because this really serves as the base income for your retirement. Everyone's retirement, even people with tons of money, this is still important to them. And so, we want to be thoughtful of how we take it. And then the last page on this, the show notes, is really for these people that come in, and we get this a lot. It's like, well, I'm going to take it early, even though I don't need it, because I'm going to save it and invest it. And I want to invest it, and it will earn money, and then I'll be better off, which is a reasonable thing that you could do. I will say that most people that come in with that as the main goal of taking it is to get the money to save it, is generally because they haven't saved enough for retirement earlier on, which is the past is the past. We can't change that. But one thing that a lot of these people are still doing is they're still working, and they want to take Social Security to save the difference. But again, if you're under your full retirement age, you have that earnings test that comes into play, and then you could be penalized for taking it while you're still working. And so if you're still working and your plan is to take it early to save it, that's a problem, because you could take it, permanently reduce your check, and they withhold the benefit, you could get potentially no check. And now you've shot yourself in the foot of reducing your check for the rest of your life. So, talk to us before you go file Social Security if you're under your full retirement age and you're still working. But let's assume you're not working. Okay, I'm no longer working and I'm going to still save it and invest it because I don't need it. What this chart does is it looks at the expected annual rate of return over on this axis and then expected longevity here. And so if we just walk through this to say, okay, I expect to live to age 77, which is this line right here, if we just drew a line going up. And I'm going to earn 3% on this investment. And then we kind of go over and meet that point. Okay, it makes sense to potentially take it at 62 or right around 62. And then the higher your earning is, the better it is that you take it at 62. I will caution people when we come in and people are having an expected rate of return of like 10% annually for the next, 40 years. I question that assumption a little bit. I mean, the market, you could have some really good years along the way, but like, look at this year, for example, the markets are down. That 10% is not looking realistic at all this year. And so you need to factor in some down years, some flat years. I would not use an expected rate of return of 10%. I would be more conservative with that, maybe 5% if we're being on the high side. But again, you can use this chart to see if I live long enough and I invest it, where is the best age to take it? It gives you an example here. So it says for a woman with an expected rate of return of 5.5%, with a life expectancy of 88, they're still better off waiting till 70. So there's a lot of factors to consider when taking Social Security. If we go back to the board with Hans here, everyone's situation is different. You need to look at the cash flow, how that's affecting you. When we get people in, we can run the numbers all day long. If you just need the money because you need the money, we're not going to talk you out of that. Take the money and be okay with it. And so, Hans, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, yeah. The whole purpose of this video, as we laid it out, was to shift your focus a bit. We're assuming that you haven't made your decision yet, and we'd like you to remain open. If you come into us, we're going to end up doing what it is you want to do. We're in the business of serving people. But most people that come to us, they want our recommendation. And I'd like you to get less focused on the here and now and getting back your share properly from the government. It's almost like that's the main purpose for some people. And I'd like the shift of that to really seeing yourself or your spouse as that much older person making it through life and wanting to have that largest Social Security. Older folks understand a Social Security check coming every month, and it provides a lot of comfort and security to them. So I'd like that to be a priority. And I'd also like people to get less focused if you're in this age group or the baby boomer age group or my age group, and these decisions are for you. I'd like you to get less focused on the system at large, because I think that's just a distancing measure, as people use that to just kind of hold all this stuff at bay. If I can just say that the system is lousy and it's a kind of a cheat and it's going to run out of money, then I don't really have to think about all of this stuff, because who likes to talk about getting old and collecting Social Security? But I'd like you to get less focused on that and more focused on just your situation, you and your family's situation, and your need for an income later in retirement. And I'd like you to see this Social Security check as the foundation of your retirement. So with that being said, I'm Hans Scheil.
And I'm Tom Griffith.
And we both thank you very much for listening.
Thank you.